but we'll get started. So, hi, Dani. How's it going? You doing well today?
Yes, good.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you for taking the time to be here today. So, Dani Grisham is a school psych and she works in Orange County at an elementary school, correct?
Yes, TK
Awesome.
through 5.
Yeah. So what we're going to do, Dani, is I want you to kind of introduce yourself, just tell my students kind of what you do, who are the students you service, and then what we'll do is open it up to Q&A. And if it's anything in the chat, I'll just kind of read it to you, or my students can take themselves off mute and just kind of interact with you live. So go for it. So go ahead and introduce yourself.
Well, Danielle Grissom, thank you guys so much for having me today. It's fun to be here. Like Nicole said, I work at an elementary school in Orange County, TK through 5. I'm the sole school psychologist there, so I'm placed there full-time Monday through Friday. We have a special day class autism program at my site. So we serve about 35 students through that program. So those are students that need kind of small classroom supports and have more significant needs, in addition to a resource specialist program that serves students with different types of disabilities, from learning disabilities to autism that are placed in the general ed setting, to students with ADHD that need additional supports. And then I also work with our general education population on any academic needs or mental health needs that arise. So it's great to be at one school, but it's also a very busy site. Yeah. Anything else you wanted me to share, Nikki?
How long have you been a school psych now?
That's a great question. I have been a school psych, I think this is my 8th year, 8 years.
Okay.
I would need to check. I think 8 years.
And I have a question because I was looking at kind of the requirements for getting into being a school psych. Do you have a license, or is it a credential, and is it state or national? That's my question. So
yes, great question. Okay, so you can have a state and a national license or credential. We have like a license number, but it's very similar to like a credentialing process. So you go through your undergrad, and then you'll need to go to a grad program that's specifically in the area of school psychology, where you earn what they call a pupil personnel service degree. It's like a PPS, and with that comes like a license number through the state. So I got my degree outside of California in the state of Delaware, actually. And so then you can get like a national certification. So there's certain requirements. You can be nationally certified to work anywhere. And that way you can come, states like California have some of the most strict requirements. So if you're getting educated outside of California, you really want that national certification so you can move about. And then you apply to the state, like CTC, the same way teachers do, the California credentialing program. And then you can also apply through the national certification system, which is like NCSP, National Certification for School Psychologists.
So you are credentialed and certified and have a license. It kind of sounds like.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Because you have an educational specialist degree, which is like your credential degree, and then you have the PPS, which is more like the license.
Got it. Got it. Yeah. I was like, this is a little unclear to me. So I was like, let's ask Dani, since she actually has done this. So
yes, it was a lot to navigate at the time, but there's a lot of resources out there to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. All right. Now I'm going to open it up to my students' questions. So if you guys want to throw it in the chat, or if anybody wants to unmute yourself, if you have a question for Dani, let's get into it.
Hi, Dani.
Hello.
I have a question. So, it's kind of more based, I guess, on your experience, I would say. What was like one of the most challenging obstacles that you've encountered, or like what was more or less just something that was more challenging in your position?
Yeah, I think one of the most challenging things, and it's probably true for anyone working in education, is just resources. Wanting to do the best you can with the knowledge you have and expertise you have, but having to work within some resource constraints. Mm-hmm. So often for me, that resource is just time. Not so much materials, but just the resource of time. So there could be 2 of me probably at my site, do the job the best way that, with best practices and how you envision. And so kind of trying to prioritize things and still, practice in an evidence-based way with under best practices when you have the limited resource time.
And some schools may have less resources and money, right? And being able to have a school psych only part-time, right? Because like some folks are split between a couple different schools. You're lucky you're at one school and don't have to travel, correct?
So when I was in Los Angeles Unified before I came to my school here in Orange County. And when I worked there, I was at 3 elementary schools, and with very limited resources. And so I basically could just assess at that point for special education. And I didn't have a lot of opportunities to do anything proactively or to support teachers behaviorally, consult, mental health. So, your role might really differ based on your assignment. Now that I'm at one site, I have more time to do those things, but still not as much time as I would like to do everything, but that's okay.
Yeah, we need like 48 hours in a single day to get done what we all need to get done, right?
Yes.
So,
Yes.
But here we are. All right, Anne, I think you have a question. Go ahead.
Excuse me, my voice. Hi, I have a question, obviously. So earlier we were talking about in order to be a school psychologist, you can, I believe I've either earned your master's or I think PhD. In your case, what decision did you decide to make as you were going through like your schooling from like undergrad to like what comes after that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I did my undergrad in psychology at the University of California, Irvine. And then from there, I went to grad school and I actually applied for PhD programs and master's plus 30 programs. That's kind of what for psychology, it's a master's and then another 30 credits for that ed specialist PPS degree. And I was really undecided. It's a tough decision to choose what you want to do. If you're going the PhD route, I do know psychologists that work in schools that got a PhD. But it's more common that they'll have their master's, and those that chose to go through a PhD route are more doing research or teaching in the colleges, like, training other school psychologists. So I think it really comes down to whether you want to kind of like work in a school, work on the front lines, work with kids every day, or if you're more interested in the policy and research side of things. Most districts are not paying you any more for having a PhD, so you're not going to make any more money. But you do have you'll have a wider breadth of skills and more like systems level interventions and research. So it was a tough decision, but ultimately I wanted to work in schools. So I just went with a master's plus 30.
That's
Did that answer all your parts?
Yeah, I think it's just wild to me that even if you have a doctorate, which this happens for teachers too, if you have a master's degree, you make like $500 more a year. And if you have a doctorate, you make $1,000 a year more. Which is crazy. I mean, the amount of school and time and effort, like it's just crazy to me. I mean, I think that we would want to have more folks, better trained and better educated, but we don't want to pay them. So
yeah, and it's unfortunate too, because districts, I don't think they see the value in sometimes hiring someone that has that systems level research understanding. But if a district hired someone to do that research and like look at things at a systems level, like how are the district's mental health interventions going, and let's like really tease apart the data and make these data informed decisions. Like a person with a PhD would be able to do that if they weren't placed at a site where they were doing primarily like assessment. So I wish more of those people wouldn't just be teaching and they would be at our school sites. I think it would be wonderful to have them.
Absolutely, and more mentorship and just lots of things for you guys too, and more support, right? I mean, I think that is bottom line for most schools and pretty much any profession at a school to get that support. I mean, would be amazing, but we're not there yet. So hopefully with more things, we can get to that level. The next question's in the chat for you. It's from Leah. She says, what inspired you to become a school psychologist?
So I knew originally I was actually going to go into criminal justice, interestingly enough. And then I kind of looking at some of those statistics and noticing how many of the people in our criminal justice system are also students, people that were once children with IEPs and were identified in special education. It really made me think like, if those are the people that I want to serve, then perhaps I should do it through the school system long before, that was even a factor for them. So I really wanted to work with children. I liked the advocacy role of being a school psychologist, where you really are advocating on behalf of children and helping teachers, learn skills so that they can better serve, neurodiverse children. And so I think I was just really inspired to kind of improve the school experience for our students that were neurodiverse. And I also, it's a great career too, with great employment opportunities and good for, work-life balance in some ways, because, if you do want a family, having summers off and stuff. So for me, it made sense personally and professionally.
Yeah. So Dani, I'm going to share a little bit about her and her little one. She has two little ones. My daughter, actually, we met Dani camping. This is kind of crazy, guys. And I've already told them that my wife is a teacher in special education and kind of what I do. And we met you guys, and her little daughter Lola and my daughter Zoe were like the best of friends, and they hung out with each other like all weekend. And now we connect, and it's kind of crazy. So, but our daughters really got along. And so, yeah, it's those kinds of things. Like, you said you have a summer off, like that's a huge thing, and you're still getting paid during that time off to be with your kids, right? So I think that that's another thing. And basically this whole class, what we're talking about is figuring out what works for my students and what's not going to work for them, for their family, for kind of their life plan, for what they would like to do. So that's interesting that you talk about the work-life balance, because it is hard. You're working. What are your hours, Dani? I guess that's a good question. What are your typical hours for your job?
Yeah, so I've worked at a couple different districts. The one I work for now has the longest hours and highest workload than the other districts I've worked for. So I'll kind of tell you that and then give you a different version of what it could look like as well. So I'm here about 7:30 to 5, Monday through Friday, which is longer than most school psychologists. And I still do bring some work home. So I usually have another additional 5 hours of work that I have to squeeze in somewhere during the week or on the weekend. But in other districts, it might not look quite like that. So like when I was working in LA Unified, my hours were 7:30 to 2:30 on site. Then I could leave, and I had another hour and a half that you could work from home. So you're an 8-hour employee, but you only had to be on site like 6.5 hours. And I rarely took work home there. It was a much larger district. A lot of compliance people. So if your workload got too high, you could call in some compliance support. Other psych friends that I have in different districts, I say they have more like a 7:30 to 4 and not as much, bringing as much work home. So it really does differ based on the district you work for. But of course, I get 6 weeks off in summer, a week for Thanksgiving, a week for winter break, a February break, a spring break. So, I think there's another 10 weeks a year that I'm not working at all. So I try and think of that when it's 9 p.m. and I'm writing reports.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. There's light at the end of the tunnel at some point. Right. So
Yes.
Absolutely. Leah put another question in the chat. She said, what is the best part of your job today? Like, what do you love about your job?
Oh, okay. So many things really. But I think my favorite aspect of this job is consulting. So getting to work with teachers, if they have a student that they're having a hard time with accommodating their classroom for or reaching that student, I think I see the most impact through the consultation piece of my job, because, if I work with a student for counseling, which I also love, I love providing that support. But it's really only when I'm giving the support that the impact is happening. Whereas if I work with a teacher who learns to work with the student, that student gets that support, the 6.5 hours they're on site at school. Next year, that teacher has a similar student, and now they've grown in the strategies that they can use. And so I just I see the impact of that work. And it's just fun. It's like problem solving. You just get to sit down and problem solve with another educator. So it's definitely the part I probably enjoy the most.
Absolutely. That's my favorite part too. That's what I get to do all day long, pretty much.
I'm so jealous.
I know it is a lot of fun. But I would love to also talk to you at some other juncture about some other things that I have in the future coming down the pipeline. So we'll talk at another time, but
yeah, I'll look forward to that.
Hey, any other questions from you guys as students, you guys can put in the chat or take yourself off mute. Like I said, Dani's here. She's like the best information that you guys are going to get. My information is like, I can just read it and go from there. Let's go Nestor first, and then Anne will go to you. Okay.
I just had a question. How well did you feel that your supervised hours prepared you for the job?
Yes, that's a great question. So I got extremely lucky, and I had great supervision. For a school psychologist, you have a year internship. That's the requirement. In California, in most other states, there's some states where it's less, but for most states, you're gonna have to do an entire year-long internship. So I was under the supervision, working full-time Monday through Friday. So I got a ton of feedback, and I felt well prepared when it was my time to, start the job. But I know that, that really depends on where you go and where you get like an internship, but you'll have a lot of choice in. So if you go through a school psychology graduate program, it's a 3-year program. The first year is your master's usually. The second year is that ed specialist degree. So it's another 30 graduate units. That third year is the internship. So that second year you're applying. And some places are going to pay a lot more for an internship, but you might get a lot less supervision. So for example, like Los Angeles Unified School District hires interns at full pay. They pay them like 60 or 70,000, I think, for their internship year. But they also place you at a school site with no supervisor. So there's you're basically running solo, and then you just call someone and check in about things, but you're not going to like watch your supervisor handle an emergency situation or do a suicide assessment or run IEPs. So, you have to find that trade-off. I know some people have to make different decisions because they need that internship money more. But if you do go through this career and you're out there looking for internships, like just remember you're interviewing them to get what you need, right? Because that's your one chance to learn the skills you need to be successful on the job. So it's like a double-sided interview. You really want to choose what makes sense for you.
I love that you're saying that, Dani, because that's totally true. Because, yes, of course, you're trying to get in somewhere and do an internship, but it has to really be in line with your career goals and what you see yourself wanting to do. So I think that that's great advice. So I appreciate you saying that to the students, because sure, you're doing that interview, but it is double-sided. You want to get the best out of that internship and that program that you could humanly possibly receive. So I think that that's great advice. Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. All right, Anne, you're up. Go for it.
I kind of have like 1.5 questions. So I'm really curious because your job is something that I want to do in the future. So I want to ask questions. So first thing, my first question, in your career, do you know anyone who has like worked their way up to where you are? Like they were like suppose like an elementary school teacher and then they decided, oh, I want to move up to become like a school psychologist. Is that possible within that career?
Oh yeah, a ton of people have made that shift. And I think they're probably some of the better psychologists I know because they were in the classroom before becoming a school psychologist. So they understand what's a reasonable ask of a teacher. They understand the hardships a teacher might face. They understand the realities of working with kids every day. So yeah, there's a lot of teachers that can go back and get it, go and get this degree. I think, and some of those units will apply. Like there's some things I have to do that, like I had to take my CBAST, and I had to take, instructional classes. And so some of those units would probably count towards the graduate program too, though there's still be a lot extra that you would have to do. But I do think there's a lot of people that it's a second career. They started somewhere else in education, and then they kind of moved up into this position.
Oh, okay. And then I think you answered this earlier, but I completely forgot. But your master's degree, like your graduate program, what was your master's in? Was there like a specific name for this career?
Yeah, so it will be a master's in school psychology. So if you go to the National Association of School Psychologists, like you want to look up that website, it's called NASS.com or NASS.org or something. They're going to have a list of programs. Not all programs have school psychology programs. So they'll have a list of programs that they would recommend. And all the programs on that list will be those nationally certified programs, which is really what you, in my opinion, is what you would want to stick with, nationally certified programs. You can work anywhere. And they've also gone through just certain like quality measures. So yeah, if you go to the NASS website, you can get a whole list of all the graduate programs that have them, and there's just school psychology graduate programs because you have to get the degree specifically in school psychology.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. All right, let's see. I'm gonna go to the chat first and then to you, Chanel, okay? So the chat says, Diana says, do you need a PPS credential with your degree?
Yes. and almost all states, you need the PPS in addition to the master's. So the PPS is kind of like it's something you apply for along with the master's. So you'll get the master's and then you usually need about 30 more units. It's just part of the program. And then you apply to the state for that PPS credential. And basically it's that you show you graduated from a school psychology program with a certain amount of units. It's signed off from your supervisors that you completed a number of hours of that internship. And then it's like passing the CBEST. That's what it is in the state of California. So the PPS is just kind of a title when you show that combination of all those other things that you've done, which are the internship hours, practicum hours, the CBEST, and the degrees.
That's great. That's great for them to know what they're getting themselves into. And then her second question. So I think you kind of answered this, but how many credentials, certificates, etc., for a school psych do you need in California? So I think you kind of just answered that. But
yeah, it's the master's, the ed specialist, and the PPS. But the PPS is really just the culmination of those two other degrees.
gotcha.
But you get to feel special that you can keep putting little letters and acronyms after your name.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to go to the chat because this is a question that I have too. How many years of like graduate school did you have to do? And then I'll get to you, Chanel. Okay. So that Leah asked that in the chat, and I'm curious too. How many years of graduate school was it for you to get what Leah says to the finish line?
The finish line. Yes, it was 3 years, 3 intense years, but after that it was finished. So again, it's those first 2 years are just some practicum experience and more actual graduate classes. It was like usually some type of master's thesis or exam. And then that last final year, I'm counting that internship year as part of the grad school experience. So it's not another year of internship after those 2 years total. And then I was ready to get a job.
Awesome. That's great. All right, let's go to Chanel, then Tiana, and then there's another one in the chat. And I think that's pretty much going to be it for our time as well as Dani's time. So Chanel, go for it.
Yeah, one more question. I think you kind of mentioned it earlier, but not really too much. I just wanted to hear more in general, what would you say as what are some disadvantages and advantages that come to being a school psychologist?
Yeah, so I think the advantages is it's never boring work. You don't have a set schedule. You're always doing something different. It's super, like I'm never counting the hours to the day is done. Like there's always interesting work to do. The pay is definitely a good income, a livable good income. It can differ a lot from where you go. You get to do really meaningful work with kids of your choice. There's a lot of versatility. So you can work with, preschool kids all the way up to 21-year-olds, that are the first several years post high school. Those are called adult transition programs. So you're never going to get bored. You can move around a lot and find different areas. You can even do some private work, private evals, private consults. If you apply for some additional exams. So I feel like I know there's always different paths and avenues for me to take. And I feel like there's a lot of different type of work that I can do. And then of course the time off, if that's important to you. As far as the cons, I think, I get 10 weeks off a year, but the weeks that I'm working it's not a low stress job. I think there are mental health needs of children that are overwhelming at times. You are going to be involved in some tough stuff. I just recently had, a situation where a kid had to be the equivalent of a 5150, but for a child getting hospitalized. You're going to have, sometimes you might be working with lawyers or attorneys over really intense cases where the district is arguing with parents over what's in the best interest of the child. And so, there are definitely stressors in the work. And I think anytime you go into any helping profession, there's always that risk of burnout and making sure that you're really mentally well and caring for yourself so that you can do this work. But I think that as a school psychologist versus like a private practice, you have the support of other professionals, colleagues, you have the legal support of the district behind you. So it's not your own, legal needs or legal, I'm not having to hire an attorney for my cases. The district does that for me when that's involved. And so, I love working with others and getting to collaborate with a lot of professionals. And so for me, that, some of those more stressful moments are worth it. And I definitely think it's a great career and those pros outweigh some of those stressors. If you look at like US News, every year they do like a best 100 jobs. And school psychology is consistently on that list as one of the best careers. So I think it really is a great career, but definitely there are a lot of report writing and presenting. So you have to unfortunately think, is that for you? Are you okay with doing a lot of paperwork at times and presenting to a lot of people in meetings like this all the time? I didn't know I was going to have to do that when I originally signed up. So I had to kind of get over that fear of presenting to lawyers and directors and, other mental health therapists.
Awesome. Thank you. And let's go to Tiana, and then Anne has a very brief question in the chat. So let's go to Tiana's question and then to the chat. Go ahead, Tiana.
Hi. So you kind of answered my question just a little bit when you just answered the last question. I was just wondering, like, is it kind of hard to turn off your like job mode once you go home? Because I feel like with this kind of job, it can be like, it can weigh on your heart a little bit, weigh on your mind once you go home. Sorry, my dogs. But also like with just certain situations and paperwork when you go home, like you mentioned, like, is it just kind of hard to like turn it off?
Yeah, I think yes, and you get better at that in time, I would say. So initially, I think I took a lot of that home, whether I was just thinking about a situation or a student. And I think over time, I've gotten much better at kind of drawing that line and being able to be really on and empathetic for students and families when I'm here and to be focused on my own when I'm home. I think it takes practice though. So, with work, you can get there and be able to make that divide. And it's really up to you to just set those firm boundaries, which are hard when you first start, but as you go through the career, you learn that it's really a necessity to have strong boundaries between work and home. So it's totally possible.
I couldn't agree with you more. Strong boundaries are huge. And I actually have to teach quite a few people how to do that because people don't know how to separate work and home life. And I think that causes a lot of the burnout that we're seeing. So I have to teach a lot of people how to do some self-care stuff.
Yeah, it's so important.
Yep. All right, last question for you, and then we'll let you go for today. But I want to thank you, first of all, for coming in and being available to my students. Just so you guys know, if you want to reach out to Dani, she's available via email too. If you want to connect with her or ask her any other questions that you just were like, oh man, I should have asked her this, go ahead and email her. She's open to that. And she's also a resource, which is really cool for you guys, and a real person, right? So all right. But the last question Anne has, she said, have you ever had students do their internship with you?
Yes. So I am a supervisor now. Wow, the tables have turned.
Yep.
My intern is here on Mondays and Wednesdays, and I was originally, Nikki had given me a Tuesday, Wednesday, and I wanted to make the Wednesday work so I could bring my intern, but unfortunately it didn't with the schedule. So yeah, I have practicum students. That's when you're in your first year. Interns when you're in your final year. I supervise them both. They usually are my shadow and they just follow me around. And then as they get more proficient, they take on tasks of their own. My intern right now has 8 counseling students. He runs groups. He does assessments under my supervision. So yeah, it's a really fun part of the job is getting to be on the other side and getting to help train the next generation of school psychologists.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Dani. It's so good to see you.
Yes, you too.
And, appreciate you coming in today. So thank you so much. And hopefully the students got some good information today. So
yes, thanks so much for having me, everyone.
All right. All right. Have a good day. See you later.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, guys. So it is time, believe it or not. So I just wanted to let you know there is an assignment about school psychs on Canvas. If you have questions, I don't want to get into it a whole lot and take too much of your time right now. But if anybody has questions, you can always email me and we can